Hi, we're Warm Street. We're unveiling this new report. It's the first time we presented it, and we're really excited. The new report defines how brands can use culture to drive commercial growth. And with any of our work, with any of our clients, we see the journey of culture as really it's just a journey. So we're calling it the cultural compass, and it's a direction of how you can navigate culture to drive commercial growth and go to new heights. Jumping ahead, I'll quickly tell you about Warm Street. Orla, if you skip ahead. And ourselves. So I'm Theo, I'm the founder of Warm Street. We've been going for like 9 years now. And yeah, I love it, and I love working my passions every day and with some amazing clients and collaborators.
And I'm Orla, I'm Social Strategy Director at Warm Street. I have over 10 years experience of working in social content and digital. I've been at Warm Street for nearly 4 years now. And this is my first time at MadFest and my first time presenting, so nice to meet you.
Amazing. If we just skip ahead. In terms of who we are, we're a social-first communications agency specializing in music, culture, and community. We craft cultural strategies that come to life across owned, earned, and paid. And we're really fortunate to work with some amazing brands and to collaborate with some amazing like-minded partners. I always feel like a little bit like a kid in a candy shop when I see our client list. And I guess when I first started Warm Street, there are probably only 9 or 10 brands that work in culture. Today, we've profiled over 108 brands that have active global music and culture strategies. The culture marketing industry is booming, it's huge, and I'm proud to have played a very small part in helping this beautiful ecosystem flourish. Our foundational principles came from the alcohol sector, and with our partners, we've had some amazing results. Those include working with the likes of Ray & Nephew, to drive a 484% growth in audience over 3 years and a 60% growth in volume. We've worked with the likes of Ballantine to drive a 1,200% increase in reach and to enjoy 10% engagement rates across their content. And for Magnum, we grew the brand, the brand over 300% over 5 years in terms of growth and volume. So the fact that it was the top performing brand within the Campari Group portfolio, and that was all since our appointment as their lead culture agency.
Cool. So moving on to the report. So as Theo said, over the last 3 months, we've been busy creating this report that deep dives into navigating culture for alcohol brands of tomorrow. So we're going to just dig right in. Just to recap in terms of where we gathered our data and insights. So we interviewed over 30 brand leaders and alcohol industry experts. We surveyed 600 culture consumers across the UK. We actually split those into 2 cohorts. So we did one dedicated to London and one dedicated to UK. Analysing 50-plus spirits brand performances and interviewed 10 cultural leaders. So a wealth of rich data, which was the building blocks of the compelling report. So why is trust important? Well, if you get it right, the trust you garner will ultimately fast-forward your brand growth, with consumers rewarding those they trust with purchases, loyalty, and advocacy. However, through our report, 20% of consumers in our study didn't actually trust any brands at all, and unprompted, only 1% actually mentioned a spirits brand in their top 3 most trusted brands. So there is a problem. There is a big problem, what we're calling trust issues across consumers across the UK. And against this mass distrust, the spirits industry, as you know, is obviously very highly competitive, and brands must constantly adapt and change in this ever-changing landscape. There are obviously many lifestyle brands that do build trust effectively, and interestingly, the top 3 brands that were referenced in our study, unprompted, as the most trusted brands were Nike, Adidas, and Apple. So there's lots to learn from them, which we're going to unpack today. Here is just a snippet, as you can see on the slide, of the challenges we uncovered for brands playing in culture today and where this mistrust is coming from. So the first one, you're ignoring 87% of the UK population. So culture brands are really failing to connect, to build connections outside of key cities, with many demonstrating a London-centric cultural identity. Amongst our study, there is this significant lack of trust with the consumers the minute they step outside the M25. And as you may know, the UK is actually one of the most centralised countries in the world. So there's a big opportunity for brands to think beyond the walls of London and beyond the M25. Next up, there's an opportunity to connect further to the female population. Females were often less trusting and connected to brands than males, so there's a huge opportunity here in terms of spirits brands targeting this demographic, and I would actually say beyond spirits brands as well. For those that don't know, women control or influence 85% of consumer spending in the UK. Women are more educated, they're more active in the workforce and more likely to start companies than ever before. So there's much progress to be had in harnessing their economic power. And finally, the platforms of yesterday aren't the ones of tomorrow. So our WhatsApp, Reddit, Pinterest and YouTube users within our study trust and feel connected to brands more compared to other social platforms such as Instagram and TikTok. More on this later. Ultimately, this is what all brands seek. I want to be adored, not endured. So let's deep dive and share some inspiration on how you can get there today. Over to Theo, unpacking the report.
Yeah, if you skip ahead, Orla.
Yeah.
I love this. I love this stat. You know, when you're like trawling through the internet trying to find the right stat and you come across that little gem. And this was it. It's a study by Twitter that shows that there's a 73% correlation between cultural relevance and commercial growth. We all know it. It's good to see it being proven, and we're starting to see more thought leadership that's actually starting to join the dots in their data analysis. I think after 10 years, the results definitely feel irrefutable. The question has changed in our conversation with clients. It's no longer why culture, but how culture. What's the right methodology to get our way into culture and play an important role within our consumers' lives? And we found, as part of building trust and in terms of building purchase intent, that there are kind of four kind of key areas, and this is a report that Bain did, which is one of the world's largest consultancies on Nike. The first is emotion and building an emotional impact of your consumers. The second is life impact. How are you benefiting their lives? The fourth is function, which is interesting because that's a product-related benefit, not an emotional benefit that's attached to the brand. Actually, that's the third. The fourth is cultural impact and the impact you have in people's lives and through culture. So I think for the brands that want to scale effectively, thinking beyond product-based messaging is really important. But I think more importantly than that is shifting our mentality. So as marketeers, we can like to focus on a few things. We can like to focus on numbers. We can like to focus on reach, on impressions, and we can like to focus on reach. Those are vanity metrics. I'm not saying they're not important, but I am saying that they are only part of the marketing matrix. What we believe is fundamentally more important is thinking about emotional sentiment. And there we look at types of metrics like engagement, sentiment, share of voice, measuring our advocacy pool and how quickly that advocacy pool is growing. Because we know that your advocate community, so your top 35% of your consumer base on average drives 65% of your sales. So it's much more important to focus on that smaller cohort because they have an outsized performance against when it comes to kind of sales. And just shifting ahead, we think it's not only enough to build those four things. We have to go deeper and we have to understand our consumers and speak their language. And we've seen this, there's a report that High Sobriety did where 71% said that they like it when they see niche cultural references in branded content or entertainment. It's not, we can't be surface level. We need to speak their language. And to do that, we need to find people that live and breathe that people's cultures day in, day out and operate as authentically as we possibly can do. Because ultimately, we believe the world would be a better place if we created less ads and more art. And I think thinking about this, we think about word of mouth and the power of word of mouth. It is one of the most powerful ways of growing a brand. It's also the most least understood ways of growing a brand. And this picture is from our work on Ray & Nephew, where we exclusively focused a 4-year strategy on the brand advocate community and the power of word of mouth. And that drove a 70% increase in their sales and volume over 3 years. And it transformed the brand into one of the highest performing run brands in the UK. Just to talk a little bit more about Ray, when we were appointed on the account, the challenge was moving Ray from a dusty bottle that was brought out at family gatherings and barbecues into a cultural icon and powerhouse. And to do that, we hired a culture team. They lived and breathed Jamaican, Caribbean, or Black British culture. They were highly passionate about it, and it meant that we can move at the pace of culture. So whether that was the right meme at the right moment, whether that was the right partnership at the right time and activated in the right way, the brand was growing viral constantly. We were enjoying 95% share of voice around key moments in the cultural calendar. We dominated share of search, and in the first year alone, the brand grew its social following by 87%. And I think that goes to show the power of culture and the power of really investing into the right people to help be the mouthpiece of your brand. And I think it's ultimately simple. I think in marketing, we can make everything a little bit over complex, but people just trust people.
Yeah.
Like, they trust a recommendation, they trust a friend, they trust family, and they just want to be spoken to on a level.
Yeah. Next up, they invest into their brand equity to leverage a growing trend of premiumization. If you can't notice that image there, that's Hennessy and their partnership with the NBA taking to the Thames a couple of years back. So look no further than Hennessy, who is doing this very well. This is about craftsmanship and a 200-year legacy of cognac, and they're massively tapping into culture to retain their premium status around the world. They're not just doing that at a global level, but they're doing it at a local level as well. They have a rich story and heritage. Alongside, ultimately, it's a renowned, loved blend and product. People love Hennessy. And they've managed to carve a story out for themselves at a community level. They have single-mindedly focused on two battlefields, so hip-hop and the NBA, appealing to that culture consumer at different levels of their markets. So both the NBA and hip-hop very much ooze prestige. They actually premiumize the brand and protect their cultural real estate at the same time. And I think it's really important to mention here, there's two spirit trends taking place. There's this race to the top, so culture does actually build prestige and brand equity, allowing brands to defend against those lower cost rivals at this tough economic climate, taking advantage of those consumers who are trend of trading up. And then the race to the bottom, so those discounted retailers like Aldi and Lidl, they're very much disrupting the market by serving a growing consumer demand for cost savings in the current climate. So for spirit brands that don't want to join the race to the top, culture does enable you to tap into that.
Amazing. And thinking about Ballantines, which is one of our clients, there's someone in the room here, I won't point them out too much, but they've been in the game for 10 years. They thought long term, and I think that's where you really start to reap the benefits of the culture strategy. There are short-term benefits you can gain, but it increases exponentially the deeper into culture you go and the more relevance you have. They had a partnership with Boiler Room in the early years, and they just celebrated their 10th anniversary, I think, in Joburg. But 5 years in, we were appointed to help develop their own voice in music and create an editorial positioning. And that meant that we developed partnerships with artists, we built a Spotify playlist, we built an editorial ecosystem that was then amplified out through the digital ecosystem across all the major touch points. And it was really powerful for the brand, and it meant that the brand ultimately started to be seen in its own right as a cultural force and partner with another cultural force, which is Boiler Room. I think to date, they're in an amazing place with artists flocking to work with them, and they're inundated with requests, which is ultimately where you want to be. You want to be on that top 5 brands that artists dream of working with, and I think Ballantines have got there.
Next up, they go beyond collaboration to a co-ownership model with key cultural leaders. And the backdrop image here, if you're not aware of who this is Charlie Sloth. He's a Radio 1 DJ. He's given the significant role in the music industry that he has to really support and build the domination of AU vodka in the UK. And he's an investor and he's a director. This co-ownership model has been such a huge part of their success, and the brand was actually named one of the fastest growing brands in the UK in 2023. They have a 200% year-on-year growth, wow. And it's a massive lesson, I think, in brand building. They have a really defined, outlandish personality on social media that really drives social sharing and conversation, as well as a brand that ensures their product is actually in the hands of the movers and shakers across the music industry, and that's obviously thanks to Charlie Sloth at the helm. The brand is able to directly connect those figureheads across rap and hip-hop in the UK and beyond, and the devoted fans fans and brand advocates are continually tagging the brand, hour by hour, resharing stories, driving conversation in that coveted DM space, and ultimately just wanting to know where the brand is going to be next, and ultimately who's actually holding that bottle as well. They use social to drive relevance, associating and engaging with consumers 24/7, 365 days a year. Look no further than Liquid Death. It's in the hands of everybody here. It's actually reached 1.4 billion valuation in the last 5 years after launch, and more followers across Instagram and TikTok than any other major water brand and many other brands combined. How did they do it? Again, it's tapping into culture. So through tapping into brand collaborations with musicians and artists, alongside an ongoing presence across music festivals, marketing festivals, and events, they managed to build a global community. And it's the brands that really continue to invest and establish that strong emotional connection with consumers are going to be better placed to navigate this current very volatile landscape. And last but not least, we wanted to mention Apple. I said it up front, but the brand was actually the most trusted among the Warm Street culture study respondents. Nearly 1/3 mentioned it as a top brand that they trust. And scanning their digital ecosystem, it's kind of clear to see how they drive connection and authenticity. User-generated content, UGC, is a huge part of their content stream. So hashtag shot on iPhone. It's a primary example of building that authentic connection. They drive global reach and engagement. They're building UGC as an always-on content stream and building that continued dialogue with their audience at the same time. I think if you're blind to the impact of UGC as a content stream, ultimately you're going to miss out on gaining that trust from your consumers.
So what can brands of tomorrow do? We'll look ahead and try and look into our crystal ball and give some tips and tricks. We're calling this section New Ways of Seeing, and I think this has never been more important today. Let's be honest, the marketing industry is dominated by white men. The booze industry is also dominated by white men, and that means that there's always going to be an unconscious bias in the output and measurement and strategic decisions that are currently made. Brands are missing out by ignoring a female audience, as we saw, all the while their economic impact is expanding. I think, as Orla mentioned, women have long held the primary purchasing decisions around household items, but they now control or influence 85% of consumer spending. So not only is it ethically the right thing to do, and we should have done it a long time ago, it also represents a commercial opportunity. And then second up is regionality. So obviously, as we said, London, we live in our London bubble. We're stuck in the M25. There are amazing stories to be sold outside the M25s. These are communities that are quite often overlooked. They're gasping and excited to have stuff in their cities. They're hungry for it. Most people can't be bothered to go to another brand event in London. Like, we're saturated. There are so many. But also, interestingly, there's this commercial opportunity here, because we ran this study last year and we looked at Manchester, for example. And when you take off our extortionate rental payments, Mancunians have probably about 20% less disposable income at the end of the month than Londoners. That's not that much difference. We also ran a concurrent paid media campaign to see the comparative cost of reaching consumers at scale across a number of different, I think it's 14 regional cities. All of them were under 50% the cost per impression than it was in London. So not only are you targeting people that have comparatively similar disposable income and high purchase intent, but you're doing so at a lower cost basis. And I think that's really interesting. And I think we quite often need to just step outside of our purview to see the opportunity. I think really importantly, we need to think about race and ethnicity. I think excitingly, Gen Alpha are well on track to overtake as the most diverse generation to date. We're going to be really multicultural, and that's a beautiful thing about living in London and the UK, but also in terms of where our demographics are going. I think by 2050, up to a third of the UK population will either be black or from mixed race ethnicities. At the same time, I think they're going to. Those ethnic groups will represent a 535 billion spending power by 2050. So I think there's a ethical duty to make sure that people from diverse backgrounds see their own cultures and identities reflected back in them, but also there's an opportunity for growth there. Because I think to date, the industry has a toxic problem of only appealing to or majoritarily to appealing to white people.
Cool. Next up, what we're calling new ways of doing business. So emerging spirit brands are being created which now have sustainability and ethical practices at the core, while many mainstream brands, not just in the spirits industry really, if we're honest, are lagging behind. Purposeful and conscious action must actually to be integrated into a brand's cultural strategy. So brands need to approach their purpose and sustainability efforts thoughtfully, making this long-term commitment, not short-term, beyond those kind of campaign headlines. So whether it's your mission and values, whether it's your sustainability efforts, you need to carefully define your role. So are you an outspoken activist? Or do you want to drive organisational change and advocate for broader impact? Or are you quietly working behind the scenes, ensuring all aspects of your business are rooted in ethical and sustainable practices? Whichever approach there is, there needs to be transparency. You know, everybody is on the journey. Be honest about that and have accountability. Purpose and environmental and societal well-being are another aspect of culture, ultimately, and should be treated as such. So it's about building that credibility at the heart. Next up, new ways of connecting. So the first, kind of vanity to sentiment. Theo kind of touched on it earlier, like moving beyond the impressions and the likes. The top 3 spirits brands in social rate frequency, engagement, consistency and creativity as their top drivers on social. So again, this is thinking beyond vanity of likes. As Theo said already, it's about that human touch. From moving to those comments, those shares, and those rich conversations that are happening in that coveted space of the DM. I urge you all today, if you are brands, just to go and look at your tag pictures and see what your community is actually posting, and more importantly, what are they actually saying. Go and have a look. Next up, unexpected platforms. So communities are now being built in unexpected places. So start digging into new platforms, silently even watching or jumping in, trialing platforms where trust is increasingly relevant. So as I mentioned up front, this is WhatsApp, this is Reddit, this is YouTube. These platforms can gain cut through. So again, I think we've become quite Instagram-centric, now moving obviously into TikTok. This gives you the opportunity to move away from those social overlords of Instagram and TikTok to a place where you can have more ownership and actually have that direct conversation with your audience as well. And finally, the digital ecosystem. You don't actually have to look far in terms of like the cultural leading brands that I mentioned up front, the Nike, Adidas and Apples of the world. Their digital ecosystem is a seamless experience, and the consumer comes in at any point of that digital ecosystem and is having a rich experience that ultimately drives trust. So it's about thinking beyond platforms, but thinking about that whole ecosystem as a whole. So, a final word of warning from us. In a landscape where fans are increasingly brand savvy and ready to call out partnerships that aren't inauthentic, you need to respect the places that we enter. So you do need to tread carefully. Ultimately, this is people's lives. These are their identities and they are their stories, and they matter. So we must listen carefully and tread gently if we are going to build trust with this audiences and ultimately drive brand growth. So finally, go deep. Remember, if you go for all, you actually target none. So the opportunities here are in connecting through deep niche interests to drive engagement, and ultimately the Intrepid brand is the one that will come out on top. You know, audiences want to see brands going beyond to demonstrate their cultural understanding. So let's chat. And just one note, the full report actually comes out on Wednesday. So if you follow us at Warm Street, LinkedIn, Instagram, you can get the full report then and see all the rich insight. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.